Hi everyone. So today I'm just going to do a follow-up session with Leah. So Leah, how are you today? What's new?
After recovering from technical issues, doing just fine.
Yeah, much better, I think, when you got a good picture and good sound. So yeah, so I thought for today we should just discuss. I remember our typing session where I
Mm-hmm.
remember typing you IEI rather than ILE, and since after further discussions which we had, which weren't recorded, weren't made live, we
Mm-hmm.
eventually settled on ILE as being the ideal typing for you. And really, typing you and a few others were, I think, the situations where I sort of changed my mind after typing from the interview to the follow-up discussion is really why I introduced the follow-up sessions in the first place and revised how I go about doing my diagnostic process.
Mm-hmm.
So, for those people who maybe would like a follow-up session, it's something which I do offer. Yeah, you can get in contact with me if you'd like one. Um, and so, Leah, what would you say are some of the things which, some of the things you maybe people who have seen, say, the interview, may have thought you were a beta and F from that. What would you say some things there sort of bring to you now
My
where they think you might not be
aesthetic,
annihilated? Your aesthetic, okay.
my overall aesthetic. People tell me I look like a beta NF.
Hmm.
I've had a lot of people tell me that their first impressions of me were EIE.
Hmm.
So that's interesting, which I won't complain. I mean, like if I give off good FE impressions, it's pretty that's pretty flattering, especially
Yeah.
when I can pull them off gracefully.
Mm. And I mean, I know that. Well, if you think of an elite, that is a type which is high in extrovert intuition. It's
Mm-hmm.
also quite low in introverted sensation, and so and they have extroverted affects as a mobilizing function. So
Mm-hmm.
they could easily adopt aesthetics which resemble those of EIEs. And
I would agree. Yeah.
I think for an ILE, it's less of a they're less likely to be so focused on sort of creating a certain aesthetic and then changing that image and trying something else. But there is going to be that they are certainly going to be similar in that respect. And ILE is going to have those aspects while also having more sort of practical, more down to problem solving aspects which an LSE might have. They are
Mm-hmm.
between the EIE and the LSE in the benefit cycle. So I can see why that would be a factor, certainly. Hmm. And what might be good as well, I think, is if we've got some people watching at home, it might be worth having a bit of a Q&A. I don't think we had much of a Q&A when it came to the interview. Maybe some people who are watching,
Mm-mm.
so maybe I should post that as well on here. If anyone would like to
Sure.
ask you any questions, maybe you could answer some of those. Um, I just
I
going to
would be
type through.
happy to.
I mean, one thing which I think was became quite clear from our follow-up discussion was the preference for extroverted intuition over introverted intuition, and it was hard to really pick that out from the interview. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that when you were doing, yeah,
I was contemplating like why I looked or, yeah, I guess what seemed, I guess, an I-ish
mm-hmm,
quote.
mm,
I think when people are overall asking me about my experiences, I tend to draw from that, even though it can be kind of tiring. But I mean, like when you're asking me, I can't remember our questions obviously because my memory is not that great. But when you're
the
asking
wild,
me, about my experiences or how I
yeah,
arrived at a certain thing, why I'm doing a certain thing, I feel like that's more like okay, I've got to like flip a switch and kind of um, use this other part of my mind to like reference that, if that makes sense. So.
mm. I think you got this. I noticed from talking to you, you're very confident going into formulating your own explanations of different things, what your different opinions were, and you did sort of take things on in different tangents in our follow-up
Mm-hmm.
conversation once the cameras are off, which I thought was
Mm-hmm.
quite interesting and helpful in terms of
Mm-hmm.
showing
I
things up.
think like
And
the first impressions could be like misleading in a way because like you have your
yeah,
guard up. I think that's another reason too why follow-ups could be beneficial. People are a
yeah,
little bit more comfortable, and you might be able to see a little bit more. Also, I think too, like if you get, I don't know with anybody else that you've done interviews with recently, but if you've gotten a chance to like, talk to them one-on-one, check up on them, in between the sessions, that might be really helpful. Because I know, like, given our interactions too, as an example, I think, there's more evidence when you're just conversing with the person.
Yeah, definitely, because there is certainly, for an interview, when you've just met someone and you're going online and you've got all these people in front, especially as a public, I think it's even I've actually found my public interviews have been ones where problems have been more likely to arise, I think, because you're in front of everyone, everyone's watching you, you're talking to some sociologist you've never really met before, and you expect to answer all these questions. There are lots of things which can go wrong in that respect. Now, I've always been of the state of mind where that is going to have a risk. It's not going to affect everyone, but it could affect someone. We always make sure to have the option for them to not have a public interview if you don't want it. But there may be people who go for public and then they find it's still, it's not quite what they imagined. So I also have that questionnaire now to ask people if they, how they feel about, talking about themselves in front of a good number of people. Like 80 people now, and some numbers are climbing. And just giving them a chance to really think about their effects. It's something they really want. And saying I don't want all my interviews to go away from public, because having at least some of these interviews publicly,
it really helps to type someone in real time too. Especially, it's kind of like a double blind experiments where like you're going in as an interviewer not knowing the person, and then everyone else is going in not knowing the person. So yeah, like a double blind experiment, no one knows what the results are going to come about. And if you go in, like say you already know the person, and you're, there's a bias, so I could see why that would work in that way, especially if people are trying to learn to type. I definitely wouldn't opt to not make interviews public or to change that in any way. I think it's just it is helpful to have a follow-up, and it is helpful to, I think, for people to just become aware or make that more known that the impressions you first give off might not be completely accurate, because people, tend to change when they're in that whole first impression mode,
Exactly.
Some people anyway.
So talking to you now, well, it's clear, you are able to, when I say something, you then offer your own explanations for why it is the case. You quickly reformulate and recalibrate what you're thinking based on what information is being given to you. So there's very much a confidence in explaining in real time in conversation, something which I find for IEIs, they're less inclined to really do. They're less fluid in that, because their extroverted logic is in a weaker position, and their introverted logic is in more of a sort of fragile, mobilizing position. And for you, no, it seems to be the logic is quite fluid, very quite. So,
could you repeat that very last part that you said? You kind of froze up a little bit.
Sorry, just from getting to know you better over the last couple of months, you've always been someone who's, well, one, able to take in new information when someone's talking to you, and then suddenly apply it to your current experiences to make sense of it, to explain what's going on. Free with that recalibration of the information in your head and explaining things out to make sense of them again. Whereas IEIs, they're often a bit more rigid in that, because their introverted logic is mobilizing and their extroverted logic is vulnerable. So it's quite,
I've gotten to know a few IEIs, and I've noticed, not to sound, I hope this doesn't come out the wrong way, but there's a bit of a defensiveness about what they believe to be true, or what about their logical explanations. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just I tend to be kind of stubborn about how people should like interact and treat each other, and that sort of thing. It's just, it's kind of like Napoleon syndrome almost. That was a weird connection. With your mobilizing function in general. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yes, essentially. It is that. It's that's the thing, IEIs, they are very fluid in terms of who they're relating to, who they're meeting, how they're appealing to different people. They're very good at that ethics side, but internally, in terms of their opinions, their ways of viewing things and formulating things, it is quite set in a certain way, and it changes infrequently, and doesn't easily adapt to new information. So yeah, and that would contradict the II typing for you.
And I've gotten into the dichotomies a little bit, which are pretty fascinating too. The fact that, you know, your creative function is flexible, as you call it, or it's a contact function.
Yes.
So that's it's always making contact with the world. But I like how you call it flexible, because
flexible.
It's open to be like, it's strong, but it's also open to being wrong.
Yeah.
Like it's open to adjusting. So
yeah, that's the thing. And especially if it's strong and it's flexible, which is logic in general for an ILE and SLE, an ILI and SLI. There's this idea that yes, most of the time I'll be right, but I'm okay when I'm wrong. So I'm not perfect, and I'll quickly recalibrate and make a better way of explaining it. That's fine. Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's ask some of these questions from the audience.
I do have a quick question for you, though. Sorry,
Go on.
I meant to. Okay, well, another thing I'd been wondering about. I do remember distinctly you saying you didn't see in our first interview, you didn't see any extroverted logic.
Yeah, no, I that wasn't really. It didn't.
Yeah, for some reason it didn't come out in the first
Which is
interview.
actually interesting, because I see plenty of it now. I'm talking to you, but back then I think Nicholas was asking you about your different experiences, asking different questions. It's more about what you're doing, what it was like at your job. There's a focus on you and your role, and also in terms of people you'd met, and in terms of what you sort of learned from them, your different experiences. Different eye friends of yours. Quite a bit of it was about as well. So I just never really got into an area which actually looked into your extroverted logic. I don't think you.
Yeah, maybe since it's like not valued, it's like, well, you don't need to know about that. I don't know. But I was wondering, like, why didn't I?
Sometimes it's quite clear. Normally, it's quite clear.
When I think like when I talk to people more, it's like, you know, when I'm geeking out about things, that's when it comes out a lot more.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a certain level of comfort. I'm always afraid of like looking pretentious or something. Maybe that's what. And also, I remember you did an interview about the mobilizing function with expat. Is that right? And he said something. He said something interesting. There was a point in there where, like, the more you use, because TE and FE directly oppose each other, right? The more you use TE, the less you can use FE. So maybe if you're like FE focus, you're focusing on FE, you're not going to use a TE.
Yeah.
So that was a thought that I had. I was wondering what you thought about that.
Well, I mean, if you were coming across as a beta and F, it suggests that FE was being used more. So that makes sense. But also seeing you in the group chat, you never really out of your depth of what's being talked about there in terms of the wide-ranging areas of information which are being presented to you. So, yeah, no sign of it being a vulnerable function. What was my rationale for being a vulnerable function in the first place?
You just didn't see it.
No,
I think that was pretty much your explanation.
Yes, that's right. Normally, it's because I just do not see it. It seems to be like just absent in the interview, which is what you'd expect for a blind spot. It just wouldn't be talked about. It's not often actually that someone talks about their blind spot as being this is a weakness for me. They're more likely to say that about their suggestive function. But interesting, that's the same thing with a role. They're more likely to talk about their role than they're vulnerable as well. More aware of it. So that can also swap over in an interview situation. And also you're very good at, when we're in the conversation, you have no trouble interrupting and offering what else you like to talk about or ask about. You don't have that sort of lack of ability to butt into a conversation. So that also suggests that your extrovert sensation isn't especially low.
Yeah. Like your role is technically dimensionality wise stronger than your suggestive, and so I oftentimes though I may not show it, there's always been like this learning curve confidence with SE, because I always feel like I'm trampling over boundaries. Like trampling over the SI. Like, I want to maintain the SI, but whoops, kind
Mm,
of. So
yeah.
sometimes I'll butt in when I shouldn't, or
Mm, yeah. That can be more extroverted sensation than some of the ethics, introverted ethics. I think. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. What's some people are asking. Random name asks, have you pondered IEE as a possibility?
What do you think of my FI, Jack?
Your FI, I haven't. Well, I haven't seen much of it, but that's sort of what happens with the blind spot. I mean, I haven't seen. Have I seen you actually fail in introverted ethics? I haven't seen you muck up in that either. But there's also the point that there are fewer situations where that would actually happen just for having conversations online, unless you actually were to get really close as a friend, and then certain expectations could be made alongside introverted ethics, which I wouldn't actually do anyway.
Yeah, I'm very. I don't know. I tend to kind of let the other person, or the way that I like assess my friendships with people is I am often just reading cues from other people, like, just seeing how they drive, if
Yeah,
that makes sense. Like, okay, do they seem like they like me? Like, I think the interactions are going pretty well.
yeah,
Oh, they kind of just didn't seem interested there. I am not going to pursue that. That sort of thing.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not. So it's more sort of about their demeanor, if anything, rather than necessarily their character. So it's reading it from an extroverted ethics approach. If it's
And
more
I've
about
heard introverted ethics described as this is more like the abstract view or the abstract perspective of it, I think. But I guess
mm,
depending if you're an intuitive or you're a sensor and you value
mhm.
FI. But a lot of it is like this sense of a person's character, and I have no
I've
idea.
I've never had you to even discuss that. I always found
I don't
your
even understand it,
yeah.
honestly.
I mean, I find your manner of conversation quite impersonal and quite laid back, impersonal, more topic oriented rather than anything about sort of personal attitudes or feelings oriented. So I just don't see introvert ethics for multiple occasions of talking to you showing up. So yeah, that's one reason why I don't think IE would make so much sense. And you've always seen yourself as being good at introverted logic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that wouldn't make sense as a blind spot
Yeah,
either.
it could have made sense as a mobilizing function. It wouldn't have made any sense as a vulnerable function. And you have this sort of fluid rationale forming. And with an IE, it's more they don't even form the rationale. They just have lots of different, well, they just account for lots of different facts. They see different situations
Mm-hmm.
rather than being so willing to tie it together into an overall rationale for how this actually works.
Yeah, like a
Very
boiled down
difficult.
understanding the whys and what have yous.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's why I don't think IE makes too much sense. And I don't really see you seeking out or seeing extroverted logic as that thing which you're working on. The fact that I would have confused it with an IEI, well, actually, to be fair, I have in the past actually mixed up IE and IEI before in certain situations. Heck, it is also possible. But that I didn't see any extroverted logic, that is also a reason why I wouldn't expect an IE typing, because that is IE would be a type which is growing towards extroverted logic.
They would want to show that more.
Yeah, that would be in their value
Mm-hmm.
set. Mm,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Now here's one from Bell. How are you with picking up new hobbies and new interests?
How am I with picking up new hobbies and new? I mean, I don't know. I do that every day. Hobbies, it depends on what you define as a hobby.
Mm,
I'm always like looking to God, I don't know. I'm always picking up new interests. Hobbies though, I'm always like in the back of my mind trying to assess the outcome of things, if that makes sense. So
Mm.
I wouldn't say hobbies so much, because when I pick up new interests, usually I want to make something of them, or I want to see how I can like maximize that benefit.
Yeah.
Even though it's like not, it's kind of like what I'm doing along the way. But yeah, hobbies I'm a little bit leery on, but I don't know. I'm always soaking. I'm always just like taking in new information. Like I'm always seeking out new information. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's just kind of a given for me every single day. And then I'm always kind of formulating in my head how I can best use that information. So I hope that
Yeah.
answers the question.
Mm. Thank you. Also, Belle likes your aesthetics, regardless.
Oh, well, thank you.
Emailed Anthrax says, "Do you often find yourself predicting people based on hunches?"
Predicting people? Could he elaborate on that? What he means by predicting people?
I would
Like what they're
guess
gonna do, like their
predicting
motivations?
what they're going to be like. Maybe what they're going to be like.
No,
No. Okay.
no.
Let me see. What else we got here? Um, ah, Fate is asking what's the type she thought to be. Well, initially I thought IEI, and then I changed my mind to ILE after follow-up discussion.
I mean, so I was new to. I don't know if they mean like in socionics. So when I first did my interview with Jack, I was actually new to socionics. I was coming, like a lot of people, I was coming
Mm,
from, Jungian typology, the MBTI,
mm.
all that fun stuff. But I did actually type as ENTP and MBTI in that
Yeah,
system too. Um, so
yeah,
yeah, in socionics, I just tried to remain open. And again, I
yeah.
just wanted to be open to new information, another possibility. So
Mm. I
I didn't
think I.
really have any too many expectations, really, except that it matched. Hopefully, the explanations match up to what seems consistent, not only with how I view myself, but also what I know my patterns to be. As long as things aren't like way
Mm,
off, like no, I don't do that. What?
mm. I,
Uh,
I I just think I'm not very good at spotting female ENTP. Well, ILEs. I think
yeah.
I've delivered false positives and false negatives on female ILEs, and I think I've
I
only
think
gotten better
it's
at that through
it's
actually.
interesting how
Yeah,
the genders might present types slightly
yeah,
differently. Yeah.
yeah. I think people often are funny about their own type. I've noticed a lot of people get that. Normally, it's more people who have an overly high bar for someone to be an ILE. But I don't think that's the case in my case, because I thought people were female ILEs who weren't, and vice versa.
I've
So,
also noticed a thing too, like learning about
yeah,
typing other people more, like, and everybody, I've been guilty of this too, but I think there's that tendency, this goes into like the biases too. There's this tendency to
mm,
project.
yeah,
Like sometimes you'll kind of project certain aspects of yourself or what you want to see onto other people.
yes.
Yeah.
I think that's often the case of people when they're typing, that they can get this funny relationship with their own typing because it's their own typing, and so that it's difficult for them to see people who are very different, who could be very different to them, being their own typing. Now, for me, I was very aware of that being a potential issue because I've seen it in other people. So I think I may even
Mm-hmm.
go overboard and called some people ILE when actually they weren't, and was too willing to accept very individuality. Then people who've actually quite like me, I went to maybe something else. So I don't know. I don't know what the actual problem has been in the past. I'm just hoping to have actually fixed it. Is all
Yeah,
the
that's what matters for
yeah.
sure.
Um, Random Name is asking, what remained the same about you throughout your life? How have you changed?
What has remained the same about me throughout my life? I think
Good question.
um I guess like if I'm thinking back to like when I'm a child and then comparing that to now, I'd always had this like playful, kind of youthful, just this yearning for like a new reality, new possibilities, or like just always wanting to discover. just always wanting to discover different things. I remember when I was a kid, I was known as kind of like, I was definitely a nerd when I was a kid. So my dad one time brought me, I can't remember how he got them, but he bought this like very old set of encyclopedias because he knew I was a bookworm. And that I was like 10 or 11, and that was like the best thing he could have ever gotten me at the time, because I just flipped through all these different topics and I was just like, just discovering all these different things, like, oh my god, there's all these different concepts I didn't know about. But yeah, that remains a very distinct memory. And I think one thing that I could say has changed has been, well, my aesthetic. That's the thing that comes to mind. When I was a kid, kind of a confession. When I was younger, I want to say like up until like preteen years, kids would make fun of me for being nerdy, and I would become ashamed of it. I do wear glasses because I have bad eyesight, but right now I'm wearing contacts. Sometimes I'll go out and wear glasses if I don't feel like wearing contacts, but usually, like, if I want to be a little bit more presentable, I feel very self-conscious with glasses. But yeah, I kind of didn't really have a sense for fashion, and I didn't realize its importance until my peers around me made a fuss about it and kept pointing things out. And so at one point, I think I looked into it. And I think that's like when, by the time when you become a teenager, you start developing, certain interests and like, so I was experimenting with these different styles, and I was experimenting with clothing. And I noticed at the time, and maybe this gets into Effie mobilizing too, I noticed at the time I got like different reactions from people, and I was very fascinated by it. So that's one thing and I think that's one reason why I dress, I don't know, the way that I do now is just, and I'll dress differently on different occasions too. But yeah, my presentability now and like my eye for that sort of thing, that aesthetic quality, it comes from way back, that kind of traumatic experience. Yeah, being bullied as a kid because of it. So
quite a shaky extroverted ethics motivation there.
Shaky motivation.
Quite a shaky motivation with your extroverted ethics. It's that, how you come across to others has been picked on in the past, and you want to sort of get that right. Yeah. Let's see what else there is here. Emailed saying she has cognitively adjusted to Jack, I think. Mirror effect. I don't. I mean, it may be if Leah was like hanging out with me like every other day, but she's not.
Yeah, expect not in person either.
Yeah,
I think it would take a lot to do that. That's an interesting theory, though.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not. It doesn't explain the amount of information we have. Yeah, Daniel Speece is saying, "I.e., well, we just answered that question actually. Did just before. Let's see. Ben Vaisland has asked, have you both talked about vulnerable introverted ethics? I've only just joined. As we did talk about it just before, actually, in terms of it doesn't really show up. And so you're very much impersonal in the way you speak, quite laid back in the way you speak. It's not focusing on your personal attitudes, how you feel about this, about that. It's more about the content. It's more about what you're discussing, the concept you're discussing. And so that's why I don't think introvert ethics makes much sense. It's not showing up at all. Whereas
yeah, and how I guess I go about forming those relations, I suppose. Like, I let them happen very holistically. remember like in one Facebook thread too, there someone asked me that question. I can't think of his name at the moment. I feel really bad. But he's like, so how he asked it in this way, I believe, if I remember right. How easy is it for you to become close to people? And I was like, I don't know. I kind of just let them get close to me. Like, I kind of just leave it up to them. If they want to get close to me, they can.
Right.
And like, if they do, that's great. If not, then we'll see what happens. That's
Yeah,
pretty much how it goes.
and that's not very demonstrative function, because that's like it's not in your control. You're putting it in someone else's
I kind
control.
of don't really want to be in my
Yeah,
control,
yeah,
honestly. I
yeah,
don't want to direct that at all. I don't care to.
yeah. No, similarly to me, I just decide how people want people want to be closer to me. It's entirely in their decision, really. I don't really create that myself either.
Right. And usually when I want to get to know a person more, it's done from like in because it's not like we don't like people or FI polar. People seem to like associate FI polar with like immoral instead of amoral. Like amoral is
Yeah,
completely different from immoral, number one. Number
yeah,
two, it's not that we don't like everybody, has this need for human connection and interaction, right? I think for
yeah,
me, like I'll get that from like, I don't know, shared interests or, wanting to I'll reach out and want to get to know someone if I have like a certain objective, for lack of a better word. Usually it's like I
yeah,
want to poke their brain or like their intellect interests me, or I just want to know more about something else.
yeah.
So it's always like in a roundabout, indirect sort of way, I guess. When people like come and say hi to me just because, I'm always just kind of baffled. Like, oh, I just wanted to, like, you just seem cool. I'm like, all right, awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I can see Spaces in the comment section. I know you sent me an email earlier about follow-up sessions, though, but I hadn't responded. Yeah, I'll get in contact with you, Spacey, actually, about a follow-up session. I know you wanted one. Okay. Let me see what else people are asking. Here's one from Emo Danthrax. Have you ever felt another person's emotional state and realized the emotions you have felt are not your own?
I could say I've felt that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when I go into certain environments, I'll notice like the overall mood of the room, or I'll notice like, say, if I come in contact with a person, I'll be receptive to their mood, almost kind of hypersensitive in a way, because I don't always trust myself if my interpretation's correct. So, like, if I sense someone's in a bad mood, sometimes it's an unhealthy tendency that I have, but sometimes I'll just automatically wonder if it's me. And that's something that on a separate note, I've dealt with, like, in things like therapy and whatnot, how to adjust that thinking pattern. But anyway, so that's a different thing. But feeling of another person's emotional state, I definitely have gotten different types of senses of that. Yeah. Yeah. And then, like, there have been points where, like, I'll be interacting with someone, or like, say you'll be watching a movie. I've noticed recently, especially, well, I've always kind of been like this, but I've noticed especially, like, I'll be watching a movie, and if like there's like a very emotional scene that comes up, someone like starts crying or things get intense, I'll start
Yeah.
crying too. Like that sort of thing, yeah.
I've actually become more receptive to the mood as well over time.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's better just to share in it than sort of be apart from it. Because otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm missing out if I'm not. So I thought I probably had to work on a bit more. No, I got that.
Missing out. Social 7, bringing Enneagram
Yeah,
into it.
maybe, maybe indeed. Let's see what else there is. Something down here. Oh, here's one from Fate. With feelings and emotions, do you prefer to feel for yourself, or do you enjoy expressing your emotions playfully with people?
Definitely the latter. I like being playful with people. I like being in a positive environment, and I like making other people. I like sharing that with other people too. I like riffing off of those interactions. And yeah, I just like being part of whatever's going on.
Here's one from Tom. How does it make you feel when you see others getting bullied?
Oh gosh. That's a tough one. Well, I mean, obviously I don't condone it by any means. I'm trying to put myself back in that situation. I think a lot of times I kind of disassociate. I've disassociated from that sort of thing. I think more so within myself, I don't like dealing with it.
Yeah.
Oftentimes I'll feel that it's definitely not acceptable. It depends on what I do. I don't always know what I'll do. Sometimes I don't even know what to do in a given situation if I don't have enough information on it.
Yeah.
Or like if I don't know what's going on entirely, like if I don't know how those two people, like the relationship between those two people, I don't know how they know each other. I don't really know what it's about. So I don't know. It needs a lot more context, I guess. I definitely don't condone that by any means. Like when I'm actually seeing it happen, oftentimes whether I'll act or if I decide to act all depends on the context. So sorry, I can't really answer that much better.
Oh, here's one from Face. It looks like a pretty good one, actually. What would Leah say is the best way she learns or absorbs information? Reading, watching, or listening?
Oh, I really like that. All of the above. Yeah, so the way that I take in new information, and when I take in new information, if I feel that it's something useful and it's something that I could apply and it's intriguing, oftentimes I'll gather from different sources. So like we'll use socionics as an example, right? So, I'll look at different socionics concepts, the different concepts of Model A and how that works, like say from, Jack's blog, the WSS blog, and then I'll also use like Wikisocion. I'll use, there's different formats of resources too. Like I'm gonna call out Kat in the best way, but like I've been in Kat's Discord servers a little bit, and like seeing and also like when we were doing the eyesight stuff for your tests, it was definitely interesting to see the different people of different types like interact with each other.
Yeah.
Like that was actually very enlightening for me. So just reading about it, seeing it in action, and seeing it in different contexts. Like I have to, when I'm learning something new and I'm actually absorbing it, or I'm taking it in, I have to see it and how it works in different contexts, and I have to differentiate it from the other concepts. Yeah, that was a good question.
Thank you, Fate. Very good. Next from Belle. What are some examples of things you like to do and explore? Topics you like to learn about?
It's a lot of like theoretical topics. So obviously socionics is one. I've also been very much interested in Enneagram. Some examples of things you like to do and explore. Sometimes I'll just fall upon things. Like I'll just, discover something. Oh, fun fact, Jack. Sorry. So I recently came across, forgive me if I don't say his name right. I think he's an economist. His name's Peter Schiff.
Yes.
SCHI. Yeah, you know him, right?
Yeah.
So I came
like sending me videos of Peter Schiff.
Yeah. Damon's really into him. Damon always geeks out about Peter Schiff. And I came across, for whatever reason, a video of his just recently. It was a couple of hours long. And I normally don't have the attention span to watch a video for 2 hours. So this is very telling. I've been trying to explore different economic models because I'm kind of undecided on my opinion on I guess, like the best economic model. It's like if you consider things like socialism, capitalism, and there's also the politics involved with it, libertarianism.
Fascism, feudalism.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So I've been trying to like, and I'm appreciating those things a little bit more. When I was younger, I thought things like economics were kind of dry, but now I'm taking more appreciation in things like that. But anyway, so
Yeah.
sorry. I looked into one of, actually, I was on YouTube and I was just kind of like dinging around and scrolling, of course. And so I ran across one of Peter Schiff's videos. And like I said, it was 2 hours long. And the title of it was, I'm a part of the 1%. Ask me anything.
Oh yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
yeah. I was like, And he was in it was actually from a couple years ago. He was in the
The
Wall Street
Occupy.
protest.
Yeah, at one of the Occupy movements, and she was just
Yeah. And I'm like,
yeah.
and I guess like my motivation for watching that was, dang, he's at a Occupy Wall Street protest and he's saying he's the 1% and to ask him anything. Like what? So many things could come from that. So I was just like, okay, well, I gotta watch that, and I watched
Yeah.
the whole thing, 2 hours long. Like
I think
it
that's,
was fascinating.
I think there's something about almost the imminent threat of potential conflict in
Yeah,
someone doing that that keeps you still listening in just to see what could happen next.
yeah. I really admired how he was interacting with everybody in the crowd, and I found it fascinating how everybody was interacting with him, like the different questions that they were asking him, and
Yeah.
then just like how they were interpreting the information that he was giving. One thing that really frustrated me too was that he kept saying, through, it wasn't his fault, but he had to like keep reiterating the same concept over and over again, because he was trying to tell them, look, I'm with you guys, like I'm for you, but you're not, this isn't the right way to do it. Like he was telling them, go to DC, I remember, and such and such. And so he basically kept trying to tell them, like, hey, I'm for your cause, I'm for you, not against you. And it's just crazy how people, like, you got some people that are like, oh, like light bulb went off and they actually realized, like, just because he's in this certain category doesn't mean, and I keep bringing this up, Jack, but this whole us versus them mentality, right? So
Yes.
it was very refreshing to see that broken down, because there
Mm.
was a lot of that, and I saw a lot of that there, like, and a lot of
Yeah.
people just assuming in the video, oh, he's rich, so he can't
Yeah.
be for us, he's the 1%. So
Mm.
I just thought those things to be very enlightening and fascinating.
It's certainly subverting expectations, which I often enjoy watching in those
Mm-hmm.
sorts of videos. I think Tom's asking me a question. How would you tell apart trauma response from FI introverted ethics? So introverted ethics are vulnerable. I, I mean, I would say that those who are introverted ethics vulnerable can often have difficulty coming to terms with and actually acknowledging when they're having trauma response. Because
Mm-hmm.
a trauma response is a very strong attitude towards something, which can then control how your body reacts to something. I think for an ILE, they could have a reaction and not quite understand why they're having that reaction, and have difficulty trying to explain that in more conventional terms of "I was hurt by X, I'm really
Mm-hmm.
upset by X." I think that can be quite difficult for an ILE to really talk about. SLE, perhaps even more. Um,
I think we have a trauma associated with it. I think there's even more so a level of distrust or just not
mm,
wanting to understand it or associate with it. Um, I'm not sure. I can't really say right now. I have been through, different things in my childhood and
mm,
what have you. I could tell you a lot of like my neurotic responses, I think, come through like FE mobilizing or through my
mm,
FE. Like when I feel ostracized, I don't take it very well. I've
yeah.
had some pretty bad reactions to things like that in the past.
Mm,
As far as like relations go, it might come across as like not trusting myself when I'm or like when I'm forming any sort of friendship. Like I'm always second guessing. I'm always second guessing if I am conducting myself appropriately in that
Oh yeah.
manner. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. It does. Let's see if there's anything else here. Hmm. Some people think you have low TI in the comments. Not sure why that is. No, I'm not sure why
We
that
could
is.
ask them,
Yeah, why do people think low TI?
what were some
Um,
examples of low TI?
yeah. Mr. T saying, can you get caught by anger and have a big outburst for a short, intense moment when stressed or pushed and not seeing any other option?
Can you get caught by anger and have a big outburst for it? In very particular circumstances, that has happened, uh, and I think that'll happen when like I've tried everything else and nothing worked, or I didn't get the desired outcome that I wanted, and so usually when that happens, it's just kind of burning the bridges. So when that happens, it's kind of drastic.
Yeah.
Uh, it's like, okay, well, I don't really care anymore what happens, so I'm just going to act off the impulses that I've been building up, sort of thing.
Mm.
Because I don't really care anymore about the outcome. It's like whatever happens, happens. I'll deal with it later, sort of
Mm.
thing. So, and that doesn't happen like a lot, but in the past, I think that is like a common trend of
Right.
when that does happen, it's usually due to, yeah, nothing else is working.
I see.
So,
Makes sense. I mean, so only when nothing else has worked, you'd rather avoid any sort of confrontation or conflict situation, if you can.
when nothing else is working. So, like if I'm
Yeah.
experiencing a problem of some sort and I'm trying multiple ways to mediate the problem, or and oftentimes if it's between people, I kind of have like this bad habit of like not saying anything about it at
Mm.
first, or kind of repressing. Oftentimes when I feel just settled about something, I'll feel like that internal physical sense, like when like I don't like this for some reason, like when your stomach gets tight and
Mm.
you get tense all of a sudden. But when that happens to me,
Yeah.
I don't really know why, and I don't really.
The body reacts without the mind knowing why.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh crap! Like, what do I do? Like, as I've gotten older, I've learned like, okay, when that happens, it means it's probably indicating something, except
Yeah.
I don't know right away what it's
Yeah.
indicating. Like,
Yes.
I don't know. I won't always know what to do about it right away. And so I have this bad habit of like putting it off. And so then when I
Mm.
keep putting it off and I try all these different ways of trying to solve the problem and nothing's working,
Yes.
then that last
Yeah.
option is just, well, I'm just going to burn it. Just going to throw it to the,
Excellent.
metaphorically speaking, burn it, just throw it to the fire. Like whatever happens, happens.
I need to move locations, but I'm going to give you Fate's question for you to answer while I move locations. So let's
Okay.
do that. Okay. So this is what Fate says. Do you find yourself reaching out to people more often than others? For example, calling friends and family all the time, phone and texting.
Honestly, I mean, I don't really know because I don't know like what the average is. You know what I mean? Like and different people interpret that differently. I'm sure there might be some people who have thought in the past that I contact them too much, maybe. And I, on the other hand, have actually more often than not, I always, people are always like reaching out to me and contacting me, like trying to contact me, and I very often can't keep up with everybody. There are some people I'll reach out to more than others for different reasons. Like if there's certain people I like to, poke their brains, pick out their brains a little bit more than
Mm.
others. I was basically saying, I was telling Faye, I don't really like know, because I think that's kind of subjective. That's different for everybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's subjective. That's different for everybody. I often find I have a hard time keeping up with it. Like, you know, my inbox is filled with unanswered phone calls and text messages, honestly. So it's probably not that. If anything, I'm kind of bad at that. I'm kind of bad at keeping in touch with people very often.
Okay. Oh, hang on. Let's see if I have any more of these questions. Oh, here's a good one. How do you deal with very strong outbursts of emotions from others?
I don't. I don't. Yeah, no. I've dealt with that a lot in the past. I just shut down. My parents, I was telling Jack, I was saying in the chat too. I was telling people in the chat, I have a beta father. I believe he's like LSI, maybe SOE. I'm still not entirely sure, but I'm pretty sure he's beta. He used to be very intense. Sorry, if you hear extra noise, by the way, that's the dog just got let in. She was sitting right beside me. So, yeah, here she is. Can you see her? No? Yeah, there she is. She's very antsy right now. But yeah, it's strong outbursts of emotions. I dealt with that a lot with my dad growing up, and he had his own problems, which I won't really get into. And I just always shut down. And even now, I don't deal with them very well. I'll often, yeah, I don't deal with them very well. And I prefer to stay out of situations like that.
Yeah. Rather that the mood were not too harsh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think there's all the questions which are aimed at you. I think they're now asking each other questions. I think there's one person
They're
who has.
asking each other questions.
There's
I
one.
don't know.
There's one person who thinks you're ESI, and everyone else thinks that's a bit odd. I don't know.
Unless they're using a different system. I think
Could
we've
be a
discovered
different
recently that people will come onto the chat or come onto the forums, and they're actually using different models.
Yes, well, there can be people who have been practicing a version of socionics and haven't really melded that in with the world socionics way of doing it.
Or they're doing the pan-Jungian approach and trying to cross socionics over to other taxonomies.
Yeah, can be. I don't know. Different people have different approaches to sociomics, and they can often have their own interpretations of what the different functions and the information elements mean. And a small difference at a very basic level can lead to a very big difference when looking at the whole type level. So I don't know. I'm not sure. Not sure what you're seeing. I don't know. I have to find out later in the future, I guess.
Did you ever get an answer on that low TI thing? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think I did get an answer on that one. Let me look up, see if I can find it. I don't know, Wolfman. Where do you see the low TI?
I don't think I am able to see because I'm on an iPad, and like I said, I couldn't really. Laptop wasn't working for me, so I don't think I could see it right now.
No.
Oh well.
Okay.
Bummer.
I can. Oh, Spacey Eels isn't seeing a lot of TI.
Wait, what?
Oh, Spacey NYC isn't seeing a lot of TI either. I don't know. I mean, I see TI. I think you do make. I think you do take when information is presented to you, you put together a rationale to explain how it fits together and makes sense. And you do that quite rapidly and quickly. I think that's good TI. That's what TI is. TI, end of the day, is about finding the underlying structures which explain how things work. Now, for some types, especially if you are, say, TI mobilizing, TI leading, it's going to be more set and fit and based around certain frameworks or ways of making sense of the world. Whereas if it's more creative, it's going to be a lot more flexible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
I usually make the connections between the different information, with the information being presented to me or that I'm absorbing at the time, seeing how it all works together, how it connects, and
yeah.
then yeah.
Oh, you got a rationale. So it says low TI in that she doesn't use logic to classify and rationalize in her life. She said herself she doesn't know what she's feeling but feels it. Now, no, I'd say that's quite normal for a logic-oriented type. If you are feeling something, you know there's something there, you don't
Mm-hmm.
know what it is, you can't really understand your feelings in terms of its subjective value, that can actually be a sign of low ethics rather than low logic.
Oh,
Uh,
so his rationale was basically the way that I explain my feelings or like my emotional states or what have you.
well, that you don't know what you're feeling, you just know you're feeling something.
Yeah, that has to do with ethics, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that's weak ethics because someone who's stronger ethics, they're not necessarily able to identify the exact reasons necessarily why they're feeling sad or happy or all the sorts of other things. They may
Yeah,
not
because I don't
know
really
what
know where
caused
it
it to
comes from,
happen.
what the root of it is. So I always try to rationalize. This is another problem I have. I tend to over rationalize. Like
Hmm.
once I figure out that I'm feeling something, it takes me a long time to like process it because like I have to go through and rationalize it. I recently discovered that people
Hmm.
will just justify things by how they feel about them, and that is like completely foreign to me. But yeah, no, if you ask me what I think about something, like my opinion on a certain
Yeah.
thing, and if I have enough information on it, yeah, I can like boil that down and tell you like what I think about a topic, you know. So like
It's
we were
like
talking about the economics thing earlier with
hmm.
the Peter Schiff and all that.
But it's like when you're presented with a purely emotional piece of information coming from within, you're not quite sure how to break that down and make sense of that because it's already from a subjective place.
I
Um,
think that's more FI, isn't it?
yeah, that's a weakness
Yeah,
in the FI. Whereas if you got good FI, the idea there is that you appreciate it for what it is. You know
yeah.
that there's an attitude there. There is a I don't like this going on, and that in of itself carries a merit. Whereas if you're introverted ethics vulnerable, that in of itself doesn't carry any
It's like
merit.
I have to have a reason. It's like,
Yeah,
okay, I don't like what's going on, but I don't really know why I'm feeling this dissonance. Let me think about it, and then I'll tell you why.
yeah. Well, and that was, I mean, he says that's just an example. She's not classifying and segmenting her reality in TI. I'm not sure what that means.
Like categorizations?
Yeah, I mean, if you mean, for instance, organizing your life with tables and structures, I don't think an ILE is going to be using TI in that way because that's very much about bringing things into a certain set order in a very physical way. For instance, living
Is
life
that
according to a
is
certain
that like a
schedule.
mixture of like SI and TE sort of? Like the
Well,
organ is, yeah.
I think. Well, I think no. I think if it's an LSI, could do that very well, and that's because that it's TI, but it's TI where it's more concrete than it is about
Yeah.
extroverted
Yeah.
intuition. Now, if introverted logic is following extroverted intuition, then it's going to be a means of explaining different phenomena and making sense of them. It's not going to be about structuring your own life in a certain way and bringing it to a certain order, because that's already going more into the sensation
That actually
aspect.
sounds a lot like NI too.
Yeah, all towards a certain goal, structuring your life towards a certain goal. Yeah, then I could go into that as well.
Yeah, NI is also boiling down like the connections over time, how one thing led to this present moment, how the present NI. So sorry, I'm trying to formulate my thought here. NI is essentially how things have, it's also connections, it's abstract connections, but it's how things have connected over time. Like, oh, this happened in the past because of this thing that, as a really vague example, this thing happened in the past that led up to what I'm doing now, which is going to play into my plan for the future, let's say. So
Mm.
it's also like history is basically an NI concept, how categorizing the happenings over history and what has resulted of those happenings, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does. And also, well, no, I don't think a TI would be able to rationalize why they reacted to something a certain way. That some can, if they've got a good self-awareness. Others often
If I've
don't.
already thought about it.
Yeah.
But on the spot, no, probably not.
If other people have reacted to things in a surprising way, are you able to try to make sense of why they did that?
Could you ask that one more time?
If other people are reacting to things in a certain way, are you able to create a rationale for why they did that?
I might need an example.
Well, let's say, for instance, I don't know, you're walking in the park with your pet dog, and suddenly a balloon showed up, and the dog started barking and running around, and eventually rolled over onto its back and started, I don't know, scratching itself. Like, would you be able to put together a rationalization for that set of behavior?
Sometimes. So, yeah, like objectively speaking, if something's playing out right in front of me, if I have enough context, then yeah, I could put it together. When it's
Right.
like my own subjective take, uh, it's like I'm trying to take in a myriad of different factors,
Mm,
you know.
yes.
When it's other people and I've got those environmental, I've got them and their environment in that certain type of environment. I'm
Yeah.
taking the environment and, you know, like I said, context. I'll take that context and I'll boil it down to, oh, well, it must have been because of actually. So a couple of friends got into an argument the other day, and I heard little bits and pieces of what was said. So
Mm,
this is an example. I heard little bits and pieces of what was said. Still don't have like a whole lot of information, but
mm,
I kind of gathered that basically person A was upset because she interpreted a thing that person B said as, like, say, being insensitive, when person B was
yeah.
trying to be helpful, but person
Mm,
B didn't really say it in, you know, the right way. So person A
yeah.
took it as a criticism of sorts, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so it's putting together an explanation for why it happened, and it's forming a mechanism for why it happened. Some people aren't very good at doing that for themselves. If they
Mm-hmm.
reacted a certain way and there's an emotion there, it's hard for them to then go and explain that emotion because it's an
Yeah, I
emotion.
have a harder time explaining my reactions to things.
Hmm.
Sometimes I don't even
It's hard
want
for us to
to.
turn ourselves into a mechanism, and it's a difficult way to do it for other people. And yeah, he also said that she seems to base her judgments, as she said, by how she instinctually feels. Does not sound theological to me. Um,
Instinctually?
yes, rather than rationalizing why you reacted to something a certain way. But no, I thought what you said was
Oh, was
actually,
like that question about the outbursts comes to mind.
yeah,
Well, that's kind of an extreme example.
yeah. I mean,
Because that's the only question that I can think of where that was brought into the picture.
you said earlier that it's hard for you to work based on how you feel about something because you actually need a reason to justify
Mm-hmm.
why you should do something, which is the opposite of what is construed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as I said earlier, someone brought up, you know, asked me about have I ever had angry outbursts or whatever, and how I deal with that. And that's kind of an extreme example. Um, but yeah, and that's an example where,
Mm.
that the nature of that's impulsive. So I don't know if that's kind of referring to that, maybe. But
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think highly makes sense. I mean, I already thought this before we had this follow-up session. This was because you wanted something more public for people to see.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, we were discussing earlier. A lot of people were giving me questions about it. And so I just kind of wanted like, a good reference, just with, wanted something to refer back to, had a little bit more depth to it. So.
Indeed. Do you have any questions for me, Leah? Anything else?
I don't think so. Thank you for taking time out to,
You're welcome.
yeah, thank you for taking time out for me and
It's okay.
setting this up.
No, it's a pleasure. I hope you have a lovely rest of your weekend. And thank you everyone for tuning
Likewise.
in today to see me and Leah talk. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.